Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into a seriously gripping intellectual showdown from an ancient text known as the Cūḷasaccaka Sutta. But we aren't just doing a history lesson here. We're actually exploring how an ancient debate about letting go of the ego connects directly to the idea of world peace, even right now in our super complex modern era of artificial intelligence. This text actually gives us a roadmap for conflict resolution, and it all kicks off with one of the most wildly arrogant figures you'll ever find in historical literature. So our story starts with this guy named Saccaka. He is an undefeated, intensely proud debater living in the ancient city of Vesālī. Saccaka viewed himself as an absolute intellectual giant, a Goliath who could just completely dismantle any philosopher or religious leader who dared to cross his path. He actually boasted to massive crowds with this exact quote: "If I engage in debate with a pillar that has no intent, even that pillar would sweat, tremble, and shake. How much more so a human being?" I mean, just imagine the sheer size of the ego required to make a claim like that in public.
Section 1. The Debater's Challenge.
Okay, let's dive into this. Saccaka's absolute rock-solid confidence hits a major snag when he encounters a monk named Assaji. Assaji is a disciple of the Buddha, and when Saccaka asks him what the Buddha actually teaches his followers, Assaji replies with a teaching that deeply, deeply offends Saccaka's entire worldview: the concept of non-self. Saccaka immediately dismisses this as a terrible, totally flawed philosophy and publicly vows to track the Buddha down and completely destroy this teaching in a debate. And to really understand the intense level of hostility Saccaka is bringing to this, just listen to the specific violent metaphors he uses to rally his audience. He promises to drag the Buddha's arguments around like a man grabbing a sheep by its long fleece. He says he's going to shake him like a brewer's sieve in deep water, toss him around like a washerman beating hemp, and drag him down to the depths like a massive 60-year-old elephant plunging into a pond. So yeah, he isn't just looking for a friendly chat here, he is out for total public humiliation. Section 2. The aggregates and non-self. So what exactly is this teaching that Saccaka is so desperate to destroy? Let's talk about the core philosophy that really sets the stage for this massive confrontation. It all revolves around how we define who we are. According to the text, Assaji explained to Saccaka that human beings are made up of what is called the 5 aggregates. These are form, which is our physical body; feeling, our sensations; perception, how we recognize things; fabrications, which are our mental constructs and thoughts; and consciousness, our basic awareness. Assaji taught that the Buddha guides his disciples to see that absolutely none of these 5 things are permanent. And, well, because they aren't permanent, they can't be considered a true, lasting self.
So the absolutely crucial point here is the concept of Anattā, or non-self. The Buddha taught that clinging to the idea that this is mine or this is what I am is actually the root of suffering. But think about this from the perspective of someone like Saccaka. His entire identity, his career, his fame, it's all built purely on his massive ego and his intellect. Telling him that his self is an illusion? That's the ultimate insult. He feels like he absolutely has to dismantle this idea just to protect his own self-importance.
Section 3. The confrontation in the crowd. Which brings us to the actual confrontation. Now, Saccaka doesn't just want to debate the Buddha. He wants a total spectacle. He marches straight into the Great Wood, where the Buddha is resting during the day, and he makes very sure he doesn't go alone. He brings a massive audience with him. Saccaka rallies literally 500 Licchavi nobles, the absolute elite ruling class of the city, just to watch him humiliate the Buddha. The stakes are incredibly high. The crowd is murmuring, wondering who's going to destroy whose arguments, as Saccaka boldly takes his seat and asks the Buddha for permission to question him. The Buddha very calmly confirms his teachings on the aggregates and non-self. Then, Saccaka launches his opening logical strike, and he uses a pretty clever metaphor here. He argues that just as a seed or a plant absolutely relies on the earth to grow and thrive, a person relies on their physical form, their feelings, and their consciousness to experience good and bad deeds. Therefore, Saccaka concludes, because we use these 5 aggregates to experience life, they must belong to us. They have to be ourself. Section 4. The King's Power Analogy. While Saccaka's opening argument is definitely resonating with the crowd, the Buddha doesn't get defensive or angry at all. Instead, he calmly counterattacks using this brilliant Socratic method. He starts asking a series of questions to gently guide Saccaka right into his own logical trap. The Buddha starts really simply. He asks Saccaka to consider a powerful king, like King Pasenadi or King Ajatasattu. The Buddha asks, does a crowned king have the absolute power and authority to execute those who should be executed or banish those who should be banished within his own borders? Saccaka, who's always eager to show off his worldly knowledge, readily agrees. Yes, of course, a king has absolute control over his own domain. Now, what's really interesting about this is how the Buddha springs the trap. He completely pivots the logic back onto Saccaka. The Buddha asks, if your physical form is truly yourself, if you own it like a king owns his realm, do you have the power to command it? Can you look at your own body and say, let my form be this way, let it not be this way? Can you command it not to age, not to get sick, not to feel pain? And total silence. The great debater goes completely quiet. Saccaka realizes he is totally trapped. If he says yes, he's obviously lying because no one can stop sickness or aging. If he says no, he completely contradicts his own argument. The Buddha asks a second time. Still silence. Finally, this terrifying, invisible deity named Vajirapani appears, hovering in the air with a flaming thunderbolt, visible only to the Buddha and Saccaka. The deity threatens to split Saccaka's head into 7 pieces if he refuses to answer a perfectly reasonable question asked 3 times. Terrified Saccaka finally stammers out his admission. No, he cannot command his own form. Section 5. The End of Arrogance. This is where the complete dismantling of Saccaka's massive ego really takes place. The Buddha doesn't just stop at the physical body. He systematically walks Saccaka through every single one of those aggregates, forcing him to admit he has no absolute control over any of them. Then, the Buddha delivers this devastating 3-step logical sequence. Step 1. He asks, are the aggregates permanent or impermanent? Saccaka admits they are impermanent. Step 2. Is what is impermanent a source of suffering or happiness? Saccaka admits it's suffering because it's always changing. Step 3. The Buddha asks, is it fitting to look at something that is impermanent, something that inherently causes suffering, and say, this is mine, this is myself? Saccaka, completely defeated at this point, has to answer no. The physical contrast between the two men here is just incredible. Remember Saccaka's opening boast? He claimed his arguments could literally make a wooden pillar sweat. But now, the source text describes Saccaka sitting there totally dismayed, his head down, sweating so profusely that his entire cloak is soaked through. Meanwhile, the Buddha sits perfectly calm, his golden skin radiant, without a single drop of sweat on his body. It is quite literally the ultimate intellectual mic drop. To really drive the point home, the Buddha brilliantly illustrates this core lesson using a metaphor. He compares Saccaka's arguments to a man walking into a forest looking for solid heartwood. The man cuts down a large, tall banana tree and peels back the layers, only to find that there is absolutely no core, no solid wood inside whatsoever. The Buddha tells Saccaka that searching for substance in his debate was exactly the same, totally, fundamentally empty. And, it gets worse, because even the audience turns on him. A Lichavi noble named Dumuka chimes in with one last, really stinging metaphor. He compares Saccaka to a crab pulled out of a pond by village children. Every time the crab raises a claw, the children smash it with a stick. Dumuka points out that all of Saccaka's threatening, arrogant arguments have been completely smashed and broken by the Buddha. He is utterly defanged. Section 6. Abandoning Ego for Peace. And that brings us to the resolution, and back to the broader theme we talked about at the very beginning of this explainer. What actually happens after your ego is completely shattered like that? Well, Saccaka doesn't run away in anger. Instead, we see this really profound transformation. Saccaka completely surrenders his pride. He openly admits his own arrogance, saying that trying to attack the Buddha was as foolish as trying to fight a blazing fire or a venomous snake barehanded. But instead of harboring resentment, Saccaka humbly invites the Buddha and his monks for a meal the very next day. The realization of non-self, the stripping away of his massive ego, actually removed all his hostility. It transformed a fierce, violent debater into a generous, humbled host. And that leaves us with this final, really vital thought. The source text frames this ancient sutta as a powerful tool for creating world peace, even in our fast-paced, modern era of AI and incredibly complex global relations. We see through Saccaka that the desperate need to defend ourself, our egos, our pride, our personal identities, is the root of so much hostility. So, if holding onto that self is causing our greatest conflicts, how much peace could we achieve, both personally and globally, if we finally learn to just let it go? Definitely something to think about as you navigate your own debates and conflicts out there. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.